Edo Saber pressed the elevator button on the 42nd floor while loosening his Italian silk tie. The billion-peso contract for the new real estate development in Monterey had finally been closed. His phone vibrated, a notification from Vera Hills reminding him of the meeting with the wedding planner that afternoon. "Mr. Saber, your mother is on the line," interrupted his assistant as she entered the office. "Not now, Petrofia. I need to review the trust fund documents." "She insists it's urgent." Edo sighed, picking up the receiver. Flora's voice sounded graver than usual. "Edo, son, have you sent out all the wedding invitations yet?" "Most of them, Mom." "Why? Your Aunt Cecilia mentioned something. Is it true you invited Elly Laive?" Silence stretched for a few seconds. Edo slowly turned toward the window overlooking Mexico City's skyline. "Yes, I invited her." "Why, son?" Flora asked, her voice heavy with reproach. "After all these years." "It's a courtesy, Mom. Nothing more." "Edo Saber, I've known you since the day you were born. This is not just a simple courtesy." Edo pinched the bridge of his nose, that uncomfortable feeling creeping over him as his mother read him like an open book. "It's my wedding. I can invite whoever I want. The last time I saw her, she was graduating as a teacher. An exceptional woman. She deserves—" "Mom, I have a meeting. We'll talk later." He hung up the call and gazed at the city. On his screen, he opened Elly's Facebook profile. The most recent photo showed her surrounded by children in a modest classroom, her smile as genuine as he remembered, so different from the carefully curated images Vera posted on her social media. The intercom buzzed again.
"Miss Hills is here, sir!"
Vera entered, carrying her signature Chanel No. 5 scent, her designer heels clicking against the floor, exuding an air of superiority that seemed to fill the room. "Love, did you confirm the final guest list?" she asked, placing the document on the linen-draped table with precision only she could achieve. "The planner needs exact numbers for the banquet at the hacienda." "Yes, I added someone else." "Who?" "Elly Laive." Vera set her Hermes bag on the mahogany desk, a malicious smile playing on her perfectly lined lips. "Your high school ex-girlfriend?" "The very one."
"Interesting. Will she come?"
"I don't know. I just sent the invitation. I hope she does. It'll be entertaining." Vera stepped closer and adjusted his tie with a triumphant smile. "Imagine her face when she sees what you've become, when she sees everything the woman who truly deserves you has." Edo kept his expression neutral, but something twisted in his stomach. The memory of Elly's face on that final night when she told him she was leaving to study abroad flashed through his mind like lightning. "It's just an invitation, Vera." "Of course, love. Just an invitation." Vera left the office with the same air of superiority she had entered with. Edo turned back to Elly's Facebook photo. For a moment, the 18-year-old Edo, the one who had promised to change the world with her under Puebla's starlit skies, seemed to judge him from the past. He abruptly closed the page and opened the trust fund documents. Numbers didn't lie, numbers didn't judge, and numbers didn't remember broken promises made under the stars. The Puyol restaurant buzzed with the subdued murmur of the city's elite. Vera laid the guest list across the linen-draped table as Edo stared at his glass of red wine, not truly listening to her. "The Hills have confirmed their attendance," Vera said, marking names with her Mont Blanc pen. "Dad insists on seating the governor at our table." Edo unlocked his phone, where the email confirming Elly's invitation blinked unread. "Are you listening to me?" Vera tapped the table lightly with her pen, exasperated. "The governor can sit wherever he wants. The Spanish ambassador also confirmed. We'll need to rearrange the seating in the hacienda's east wing." Edo discreetly opened Instagram. Elly's latest post showed her class preparing a school play. "The third-grade kids from Griswapan presenting Don Quixote. So proud of my little actors," the caption read. "What are you staring at?" Vera leaned over the table, her voice brimming with challenge. "Work." "Liar." Vera snatched the phone from Edo with a swiftness that surprised him. "Elly Laive? Seriously, Edo?" "I was checking if she received the invitation." "You know what?" Vera smiled as she scrolled through the screen. "We could seat her with my cousins. The twins just got back from Paris and can't stop talking about their shopping spree on Rue du Faubourg. Or better yet, with the Ruiz Pardos. Isabel just debuted her third engagement ring. I'm sure they'll have plenty to talk about. The waiter approached with the main courses. Edo cut into his Wagyu steak with more force than necessary, the metallic sound of the knife echoing in his ears. Why does it bother you so much? Vera pressed, her eyes fixed on him, studying his every move. It doesn't bother me. Then it settled. Table 16 with the Ruiz Pardos. Vera jotted something down on her list, her smile one of smug satisfaction. Isabel can give her tips on how to snag a rich husband. Suddenly, a memory from high school flooded Edo's mind. Elly helping him study for the calculus exam, sharing the sandwiches she had made herself, her genuine laughter as she explained how formulas were nothing more than recipes requiring patience and common sense. I don't need to be rich, she had said, gazing at the horizon with a mix of dreams and reality. I just want to do something that matters. Edo closed his eyes for a moment, but Elly's image remained vivid in his mind. I'll seat her at table 8, he declared finally, his tone resolute, with the business people. Darling, don't be ridiculous. She's my guest. Vera studied him for a long moment. Her eyes were cold and calculating. As you wish. It will be more interesting that way, she said, taking a sip of champagne. Her smile stretched into something almost ironic. You know, we should include her in Sunday brunch. You know, the day after the wedding, on the estate terrace. I don't think she'll stay long. Oh, but we must insist. Vera pulled out her own phone and started typing. I'll tell Sophia to include her in all the activities. We want her to feel special. Edo felt that familiar unease. It was the same tone Vera used to destroy her rivals, the women who dared to steal her spotlight. The waiter cleared the empty plates. Edo ordered a double whiskey. By the way, Vera continued, not looking up from her phone, Mom suggests we use the family's silverware for the main table, the ones they used at my grandparents' wedding in Madrid. Edo nodded absently. In his mind, Elly was still there, in that schoolyard in Puebla, with her simple dress and eyes full of priceless dreams. High school. Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna hadn't changed. Edo gazed at the building from his Mercedes, parked in front of the same green gate where he used to wait for Elly every morning. Nostalgia struck him without warning. September 2004, the first day he saw her. Elly was running down the main hallway, carrying a model of the solar system. Her uniform was perfectly pressed, her hair tied back in a simple braid. Watch out! She shouted, barely dodging him by inches. He helped her pick up Jupiter, which had fallen off during the near collision. I'm Elly, she said, smiling as she taped the planet back into place. Edo, physics with Professor Mendoza. Yes. Are you late too? From that day on, they studied together in the library. Elly had a unique way of explaining even the most complex problems, relating them to everyday life. Equations are like cooking recipes, she'd say. You just have to follow the steps patiently. Edo lit a cigarette, remembering the afternoons on Elly's rooftop. Her mother, Flora, would always bring them hibiscus water and sweet bread. They made plans, daydreamed. I want to build schools, he told her one afternoon, looking at the sky. Not these gray schools. Schools with gardens, labs, huge libraries, and I'll teach in one of them, she replied, lying on his shoulder, her gaze fixed on the future. The scholarship came in their final year, Stanford University, full program. Elly had helped him prepare his application, corrected his essays, and celebrated more than anyone when he received the acceptance letter. You're going to change the world, she told him the night before his departure at the Puebla Overlook. Come with me. You know I can't. My family needs me here. They kissed for the last time under the stars, but each carried a promise in their heart that the other could never fulfill. They promised to write to each other, to stay in touch. For the first few weeks, they did. Then, life at Stanford consumed Elly. New friends, new ambitions. Elly's letters became less frequent, her responses shorter. One day, while checking his mail, Edo found a photo. Elly at her graduation as an elementary school teacher. I did it, the message read. And your school's with gardens? He never replied. Edo put out his cigarette. His phone vibrated. A message from Vera about the wedding menu tasting. At the entrance of the high school, a group of students walked out laughing. For a moment he thought he saw Elly among them, holding her solar system model and her unbroken dreams. He started the car. In the rearview mirror, the gray building faded away, along with the echo of promises time had turned to dust. "Miss Elly! Miss Elly!" Lucia shouted, waving her notebook. "I finished my math homework." Elly set down the chalk and walked over to the little girl's desk. The Benito Juarez Elementary School buzzed with the energy of 30 third graders solving multiplication problems. "Very good, Lucia." Elly reviewed the exercises. "See, when you organize the numbers like this, it's easier to solve them." The ceiling fan spun lazily, battling the May heat. On the walls, educational posters blended with students' drawings, a map of Mexico, multiplication tables, and the solar system they had built last month.
"Teacher," Miguel raised his hand. "Can you help me with this problem?" Elly was heading toward him when Rosita, the secretary, appeared at the door.
"Elly, this arrived for you," she said, holding out an elegant envelope. "It looks important."
The recess bell rang. The children packed up their notebooks amidst laughter and ran to the playground. Elly sat at her desk studying the thick paper envelope with golden letters.
"Edo Saber and Vera Hills request the honor of your presence at their wedding celebration. Hacienda Las Mariposas, Saturday, July 15th. Banquet, dancing, brunch the following day."
Her hands trembled slightly. "Hacienda Las Mariposas, Saturday, July 15th. Banquet, dancing, brunch the following day."
"Bad news?" Rosita asked.
"No, nothing. Just a wedding invitation."
"With paper that fine? Must be someone important." Elly slipped the invitation into her bag. Through the window, she watched her students playing soccer with a worn-out ball. Her phone vibrated. A message from her sister Maria. "Are you home yet? I need your opinion on Anna's graduation dress. I'm leaving in an hour. I have something to tell you." The afternoon passed with 3-digit division problems and a lesson on states of matter. At 2 o'clock, when the last student said goodbye with a hug, Elly took out the invitation again. She opened her laptop, the one she had bought in installments last year. Google displayed headlines. "Edo Saber, the new face of construction in Mexico. Grupo Saber announces multi-million-dollar project in Monterrey. The 30 most influential people under 40. The photos showed a different Edo. Perfect suits, expensive watches, a practiced smile. Beside him, a blonde woman wearing jewelry, likely worth more than the school's annual budget. Elly closed the laptop. She packed the pending notebooks into her worn-out bag and turned off the fan. On the chalkboard, the day's multiplication problems remained, written in her careful handwriting. As she stepped outside, she stopped in the yard. The worn-out ball lay forgotten under the jacaranda tree. She picked it up, thinking about buying a new one with her next paycheck. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the empty playground. Elly took a deep breath, clutching the invitation in her bag as if holding a fragment of a past she thought she had left behind. Elly and Maria's apartment smelled of freshly brewed coffee and sweet bread from Don Toño's bakery. Maria stared at the invitation on the kitchen table as if it were a bomb about to explode. "Are you going?" she asked, pouring 2 cups of coffee. "I don't know. You know it's a trap, right?" Elly ran her finger over the golden letters. The paper was so fine she almost feared tearing it. "Edo isn't like that. The Edo I knew wasn't like that." Maria dipped her concha into the coffee. "Did you see the news? The photos with his fiancée?" Elly pulled out her phone. Instagram displayed Vera Hills' account. Yachts in Ibiza, fashion shows in Milan, parties in mansions. The latest photo showed her and Edo on the cover of a society magazine. "All his rich friends will be there," Elly thought, letting out a sigh. "I keep thinking about how some people spend on a dinner what we earn in a month," Maria continued, her voice barely a whisper, as if the words could steal away the peace they had at that moment. "I don't care about money. I never did," she repeated, like a mantra that gave her comfort but carried a shadow of bitterness. "They do, though. They care about it," Elly thought, though she didn't say it out loud. Maria, holding the piece of paper in her hand, looked at the invitation. Hacienda Las Mariposas. The name echoed in Elly's mind like something distant, unattainable. "Do you know how much a wedding there costs?" Elly's phone vibrated loudly, cutting through the silence. It was a message from her mother. "Are you coming to dinner on Sunday? Your dad made chiles and nogada." The same invitation as every week, the same request, the same attempt to bring the family together. Elly stared at the screen, and for a moment, the weight of the decision bore down on her. If I don't go, she'll think it affects me, that the silence between us means something more. But what if it's the other way around? What if she's still waiting at the table, thinking everything is the same as before? "And didn't it affect you?" Maria asked, sensing her sister's indecision. Elly stood up abruptly, trying to escape the thoughts that haunted her. She searched for more bread in the cupboard, and when she opened the wooden door, she found, as always, a photograph from her graduation hanging beside the plates, almost untouched. The same photo she had sent to Eduardo years ago, the same look in her eyes, but now the difference was immense. 12 years have passed, Maria, and I'm still here, she thought, still looking for answers where there are none.
"So why did he invite you now?" Maria asked, breaking the tense silence.
Elly couldn't answer immediately. The afternoon light of Puebla filtered through the window, painting everything in a warm orange hue that reflected off the walls of the old house. Outside, everything remained the same, but inside her, the feeling was different. Everything was different. "I'll need a dress," she finally said, as if that could untangle the web of thoughts that had her trapped. Maria sighed.
I have the blue dress I wore to Cousin Lucia's wedding. It's simple but elegant.
Elly smiled faintly, seeking some solace in her sister's words. "And it suits you better than me," Maria added with a smile, though a hint of sadness lingered in her tone. Elly looked at the invitation again, the glossy paper glinting under the warm kitchen light, like a promise or a threat, depending on how she chose to see it. Her phone vibrated again, this time with a photo in the parents' WhatsApp group. "Thank you, Miss Elly, for teaching them about the solar system. Miguel won't stop talking about the planets." A small breath of relief amidst it all, a nearly involuntary smile. This was her life now. Coffee with her sister, chiles en nogada on Sundays, children discovering the universe in a modest school with noisy fans and walls that had never known luxury. "I'm going to go," she finally declared with more conviction than she truly felt. Maria stared at her, puzzled. "Are you sure?" Elly nodded, though the doubt still weighed on her chest. She slid the invitation back into its envelope with a resolve she wasn't entirely certain she had. "Because I'm not the girl who fell for his promises anymore." The sun was setting behind Puebla's towering cathedral, painting the sky a deep red, and Elly thought of her students, her parents, and the simple life she had chosen. On her nightstand, the invitation would wait until July, a reminder that sometimes going back to the past is the only way to confirm that the present is exactly where you're meant to be. The luxury events office occupied the penthouse of a modern building in Polanco, with views that dominated the city like a symbol of the power emanating from its walls. Valentina watched the wedding planner Sofia Mendez as she arranged the seating cards on a detailed model of the estate. "Table 8 is crucial," Valentina explained, her tone firm, marked by the confidence with which she controlled every detail. "I want the Ruiz Pardos near the special guest." "Elly Laive?" Sofia asked, glancing at her tablet. "Exactly. Isabel Ruiz Pardo will be wearing that emerald necklace she flaunted so much. It's a unique opportunity, you understand?" Sofia nodded, understanding perfectly. She also confirmed the attendance of Diego Montero, the cousin who had just purchased the vineyard in France.
Perfect, Vera replied, her gaze calculated. And what about Sunday's brunch?
"Everything's arranged. Crystal champagne service starting at 11, Sofia confirmed. At that moment, Valentina's phone rang. It was Eduardo. "Love, do you need anything? Why did you invite Elly to the brunch?" Vera looked at Sofia and gestured for her to step away discreetly. Vera's phone stayed pressed to her ear, but her mind was already focused on the response. "I want her to feel included," she replied without hesitation. There was silence on the other end of the line. Finally, Edo spoke, his tone sharp. "Cancel her invitation to the brunch." "Impossible," Vera replied firmly. "It's already confirmed. It would be in poor taste." Edo didn't respond, and Vera felt the tension in the conversation begin to rise. "Vera, I have to go. I'm finalizing the details." "I love you," Eduardo said before hanging up. Vera turned her attention back to the model. The planner returned with more documents. The view from the window gave her an air of superiority as the city stretched out at her feet. A city she could dominate at will,
On her wrist, the Cartier watch Eduardo had gifted her on their first anniversary gleamed with the same intensity as her ego.
"One more thing, Sophia," she said without taking her eyes off the model. "I need Elly Laive's phone number."
"For what?" Sophia asked, surprised.
I want to make sure she feels
"Welcome," Vera replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes.
In her bag, Vera's iPhone already held a detailed list of instructions for every guest at Table 8. The downfall of a provincial teacher amidst the Mexican elite had to be a carefully choreographed spectacle. The clock tower struck 5. In 3 hours, she would be dining with the wives of Edo's partners, and Elly Laive would be part of the script, though she didn't know it yet. She would tell them about the special guest. The pieces were beginning to fall into place. Vera smiled, her face reflecting a cold serenity. In her world, humiliation wasn't just an act, it was an art, and she considered herself a master of it. Grandmother Flora's wardrobe smelled of mothballs and memories of forgotten times. Elly and Maria carefully sifted through vintage dresses while Flora watched from her rocking chair, stroking her cat with a melancholic tenderness.
"That blue one will look perfect on you," said Grandma Flora, pointing to a silk dress as Elly pulled it out of the wardrobe. "I wore it to your Aunt Consuelo's wedding." The dress was simple yet elegant, with a classic cut that fell just to the knee and a modest boat neckline.
"Try it on,"
Maria urged, her eyes filled with hope.
Elly looked at herself in the old bedroom mirror. Her reflection revealed a woman who, for the first time, felt like she belonged. The fabric embraced her figure, as if it had been woven just for her. "I have something else," Flora said, rising slowly from her chair with effort. She walked toward her dresser, her movements deliberate but determined. "I saved this for a special occasion." From a velvet box, Flora retrieved a delicate pearl necklace. "Grandma, I can't," Elly protested, seeing the necklace.
"Your grandfather gave it to me on our 15th wedding anniversary."
Flora's wrinkled hands fastened the necklace around Elly's neck.
The pearls, though modest, seemed to glow with a light of their own.
Maria held her breath.
"It's perfect."
Grandma carefully adjusted the clasp and stepped back, her eyes gleaming with a mix of mischief and satisfaction.
"Now you look like a proper lady, but unpretentious. Let them see that elegance can't be bought." Elly touched the pearls gently, as if testing the purity of a fulfilled dream. In the mirror, her reflection showed a serene and confident woman, so elegantly simple that she defied any superficial judgment.
"Why are you really going?" Flora asked from her rocking chair, her tone suddenly more direct.
"Because I was invited."
Elly Laive replied without hesitation, with the same calm that had always defined her. Flora let out a nearly inaudible chuckle.
"You don't fool me. I've known you since you were in diapers."
Silence filled the room, the cat stretching lazily in the corner.
"I'm going because I need to close that chapter," Elly finally admitted, lowering her gaze to the floor, as if those words could lighten the burden she carried. Grandma nodded, her face revealing silent understanding.
"The pearls are yours," she said firmly, raising a hand to stop Elly's protest. "It's time they passed to the next generation." Maria began looking for shoes as Elly changed. The dress and necklace were carefully put away, awaiting the day that was yet to come.
Before leaving, Flora took Elly's hand in hers with a tenderness she had never shown before.
Remember, my child, true class isn't in what you wear, but in how you carry your head high.
The afternoon sun streamed through the colonial windows, illuminating the pearls resting on Elly's neck like promises of dignity and an inescapable future.
The Maximo restaurant, an exclusive private club in Los Lomas, buzzed with the murmurs of the capital's high society. Vera presided over a table of 10 women, all wives or fiancées of the most important members of the Ramirez group.
So you're saying she was his high school girlfriend?
Asked Isabel Ruiz Pardo, fiddling with her new emerald necklace. A very peculiar story, Vera responded, maintaining her composure. She sipped her martini, her expression revealing a mix of interest and amusement. It seems Eduardo wants to be generous with his past.
Mariana Santos, the wife of the principal shareholder, leaned forward.
And you say she's a teacher?
A primary school teacher at a public school in Puebla, Vera replied with a faint smile as discreet giggles spread among the women.
Has she chosen her dress yet? Asked another woman. From what I hear, it's borrowed.
Vera feigned discretion, but everyone knew her interest went beyond mere formalities.
From an aunt or grandmother, something like that, she commented, her gaze quickly scanning the details of the restaurant. At a separate table, Eduardo lunched with his associates, oblivious to the conversations unraveling around him. "And will you seat her with us?" Isabel asked, a subtle air of superiority in her gesture as she touched her necklace once more.
"Table 8. I want her to feel comfortable," Vera replied with a smile laden with intentions.
"Of course," Mariana agreed, malice gleaming in her eyes. "We can talk about our last trip to Paris."
"Or my new jewelry collection," Isabel added with a touch of arrogance.
Vera glanced at her engagement ring, a diamond that had cost more than an apartment. Her thoughts seemed darker in that moment, though her face betrayed nothing.
"Just remember to be subtle," he reminded them, letting the final word drop softly.
The waiter served the second round of cocktails, and the conversation shifted to high society gossip, but the subject of the provincial teacher lingered, like an expensive perfume that refuses to fade from the air. Across the restaurant, Eduardo checked his watch impatiently. He had a video call with foreign investors in half an hour. His phone buzzed with a new notification. Carmen Ortiz had confirmed her attendance at the wedding.
The sound of laughter from Vera's table reached his ears. A heavy, uncomfortable weight settled in his stomach as he realized he had started something he could no longer stop.
He asked for the check without looking up. The laughter continued. The Las Mariposas estate rose among perfectly manicured gardens, like a postcard from colonial Mexico. Elly observed from the taxi the details of the stone fountains, the centuries-old arches, and the cobblestone paths where luxury cars already awaited their owners.
"Are you sure this is the place, miss?"
The taxi driver asked, glancing at the large iron gates.
"Yes," Elly replied firmly as she paid the fare.
"Thank you."
Grandma Flora's blue dress felt light and fresh against her skin, and the pearls, discreet yet elegant, gave her a confidence she had never felt before. In her small handbag, she carried the gift, an antique poetry book she had found in a second-hand bookstore.
At his invitation, a man in a dark suit appeared at the entrance, glancing at his tablet. "Table 8, Miss Laive, this way, please," he indicated as Elly followed with steady steps. The estate's garden had been transformed into a magical setting. White orchids cascaded from arches, and floating candles cast a warm, soft light over the central fountain. Waiters, impeccably dressed in white gloves, served champagne in intricately carved crystal glasses.
"Vera!"
The warm, vibrant voice of Flora, Edo's mother, cut through the murmur of conversations. The woman approached, dazzling in a wine-colored dress that emphasized her elegant poise. Her embrace was enveloping and sincere.
"How wonderful to see you, dear. You look stunning." Flora's gaze lingered on the pearls around Elly's neck with an approving smile. "Are they a family heirloom?"
"They belong to my grandmother," Elly replied with a soft smile.
"The best jewels are always family treasures." Flora's eyes glimmered with a hint of pride, as if the beauty of the moment was tied to generations of history. "Come, let me escort you to your table." Flora guided her across the patio, but Elly could feel the eyes of others on her. Discreet murmurs, silent evaluations. One woman, dazzling in an emerald necklace, observed her with particular attention. When they reached table 8, near the dance floor, Flora introduced her to the other guests.
"Elly, let me introduce you to Isabel Ruiz Pardo and her husband, Diego Montero, the bride's cousin." The introduction came with formal smiles and handshakes.
"We've heard so much about you," Isabel said with a sly smile, her emerald necklace gleaming under the garden's soft lights. "I hope it's fascinating."
"Is it true you're a teacher?"
she asked before Elly could respond, her tone like soft venom.
Before Elly could reply, the collective murmur of the guests announced the arrival of the bride and groom. Eduardo, impeccable in his tuxedo, escorted Vera, radiant in a couture gown. Their eyes met for a moment, and in that instant, 12 years of distance compressed into a single look. Elly's serenity remained intact, as she had learned from her grandmother through years of lessons on dignity. The pearls around her neck glimmered with their own light as Elly held her champagne glass, barely sipping, while observing the social dance unfolding around her. "And how is teaching at a public school?" Isabel asked, her voice sweetly sharp. It must be so fulfilling.
It is, Elly replied, maintaining her composure. Recently, one of my students won the state mathematics competition. Diego Montero, intrigued, leaned in with a genuine smile. Against private schools? That sounds fascinating.
Yes, Miguel has a natural talent for numbers.
Though I imagine the budget must be a constant challenge, Isabel added, adjusting her necklace.
Creativity makes up for many shortages, Elly responded, smiling as she took a sip of champagne.
Last week, we recreated the solar system using recycled materials. The children learned far more than they would from any digital planetarium.
From a distance, Vera watched the scene with a growing mix of jealousy and irritation. The provincial teacher, it seemed, not only remained composed, but had genuinely captivated the guests' attention.
Your ex-girlfriend seems to be fitting in well, Vera commented with feigned sweetness, her gaze fixed on Elly with disdain. Don't you think?
Edo didn't respond, his eyes fixed on Elly. Her blue dress, simple yet elegant, the discreetly shining pearls, and her calm demeanor stood in stark contrast to what he and Vera had anticipated.
Children are the future of our country, Elly continued, animated. If I can inspire even one to pursue their dreams, then my work has meaning.
My son attends Columbus Institute, another guest interjected with a somewhat condescending smile. They pay a fortune to their teachers, but the education is terrible.
Sometimes money isn't the answer, Elly replied calmly. Dedication and passion for teaching are priceless.
Diego Montero smiled, impressed by her response, and then asked, Would you like to dance, Miss Laive? Isabel nearly choked on her champagne, but Elly, without hesitation, accepted with a smile. It would be my pleasure.
As they made their way to the dance floor, Vera gripped her glass so tightly her knuckles turned white.
Wasn't she the one supposed to feel out of place? She muttered furiously under her breath.
Edo didn't reply. On the dance floor, Elly moved with natural grace. Her laughter, genuine and bright, stood out against the forced smiles of the others. The pearls around her neck sparkled under the garden lights, like stars refusing to be overshadowed by the most expensive adornments. Later, Flora found Elly in a side garden, among the bougainvillea, creating a refuge from the party's clamor.
You needed some air, didn't you? Flora said, sitting beside her on the stone bench. I needed it too. Elly nodded, grateful for the respite.
You've changed a lot, Elly. You're no longer the girl who used to study in my kitchen. Flora observed her closely. It's been many years, hasn't it?
Edo has changed too, Elly replied, her voice tinged with melancholy.
For the better? Flora asked, her gaze reflecting a certain sadness.
The soft sound of music timidly filtered into her corner as a moth danced among the nearby flowers.
Why did you really invite me?
Vera Hills whispered, letting out a sigh that seemed to carry years of sorrow.
My son, he lost his way. Power, money, Edo Saber. She paused, her memories fluttering in her mind like the very moths around her. I think he wanted to prove something to himself, bringing me here, showing me what he's become. Vera touched the pearls of Elly Laive with a tenderness that contrasted with the hardness in her gaze. But I didn't expect to find the woman you are now. Across the garden, Vera searched for Edo. She found him in his makeshift office, engrossed in his phone.
Your mother is scheming something with her, she accused, shutting the door with a dull thud. Did you see her? Acting like she's one of us. Edo calmly put his phone away. She's a guest, Vera, a public school teacher. Did you see how Diego looked at her? How everyone falls for her false act of humility?
It's not an act. You're defending the indefensible. In the garden, Elly and Vera continued their conversation.
Do you know what Edo told me when he got into Stanford? Vera recalled, her voice tinged with nostalgia she couldn't hide. He said he would build schools with gardens and vast libraries.
Elly smiled with a mix of sadness and affection. I remember. Now, he builds malls and office skyscrapers.
A gentle breeze stirred the bougainvilleas as the photographer called the guests for group photos.
I have to go, Elly said, rising with a resolute gesture. Elly, Vera grabbed her hand firmly. Thank you. For what?
For showing my son what could have been, what he could have been.
In the office, Vera stormed out, leaving Edo alone with his thoughts. Through the window, he saw Elly returning from the garden, her blue dress swaying softly in the evening breeze. His mother's words reverberated in his mind. What could have been, and what is? The colonial chapel gleamed with the light of hundreds of candles. Vera walked down the central aisle, her Italian gown whispering against the polished marble floor. Edo waited at the altar, his face impassive. From her seat in the fifth row, Elly watched the scene with a serenity only she could maintain. The book of poetry she had brought as a gift lay heavy in her lap. The priest began the ceremony. As he spoke of love and commitment, Elly remembered another promise made years ago under a starry sky in Puebla. "We'll build something important together," Edo had said. "Something that makes a difference." Vera's vows were perfect, rehearsed, as her diamond ring sparkled under the soft candlelight. When it was Edo's turn, his gaze briefly shifted to the fifth row. Elly held his gaze, calm, without reproach, just a definitive tranquility in her eyes. "I, Edo Saber," his voice faltered, barely a whisper. In the first row, Vera clenched her handkerchief tightly. At that moment, a child began crying in the chapel, breaking the solemnity of the atmosphere. Elly smiled instinctively, her teacher's nature immediately kicking in. The child's mother tried to calm him, embarrassed. Edo continued, but something in his expression changed. Perhaps it was the child's cry, or Elly's genuine smile, or the weight of the promises that echoed in the church's ancient walls. The priest declared them husband and wife. Vera glowed triumphantly. Applause filled the chapel, but Elly remained seated while the crowd stood. Her hand caressed the worn cover of the poetry book, her thoughts on her students and the promises she had kept. As the couple passed by her row, Edo looked at her again. This time, he was the one to look away first. The chapel bells rang, announcing the union. From her pew, Elly took a deep breath. Some promises break, she thought, so that others, much more important, can be fulfilled.
The hacienda's gardens had been transformed under the golden twilight. Hundreds of hanging lights created an ethereal atmosphere above the tables arranged around the central fountain. At table 8, the conversation flowed effortlessly. Diego Montero, who had abandoned his aristocratic posture, seemed genuinely intrigued. "So you used the solar system to teach fractions?" he asked, curious.
Yes! Elly cut a piece of her steak, focused. I explained that if Earth's orbit is a unit, we can calculate the proportions of the other orbits.
Isabel Ruiz Pardo watched the interaction with growing irritation, her emerald necklace forgotten around her neck as the night wind whispered through the leaves.
"It's fascinating." Diego leaned a bit closer, his eyes gleaming with interest. "My foundation supports educational projects. Maybe we could—" "Diego, dear." Vera's voice cut through the conversation, soft yet firm. "They need you at the main table." Elly seized the moment to take in her surroundings. At the main table, Edo barely touched his wine glass, lost in thought. Flora, seated beside him, was engaged in a tense conversation with Vera's mother, her words carefully chosen but laced with disdain. "More wine, miss?" a waiter interrupted briefly. "No, thank you," Elly replied without looking at him, her gaze fixed on the center of the table. Sensing an opportunity, Isabel turned to Elly. "Don't you like this wine? It's an 82 Chateau Margaux, highly esteemed." Elly smiled graciously, maintaining her composure. "It's excellent, but I prefer to keep a clear mind."
Isabel didn't back down. "Of course you're not used to wines this exclusive. My father always taught me that the best wine is the one enjoyed in good company."
Elly, with an equally polite tone, responded, "The price is the least of it. What matters most is indeed the company."
Several heads at the table nodded discreetly, recognizing a poise in Elly that Isabel could never match. Isabel, visibly annoyed, had no reply. At the main table, Vera watched with fury as her plans to humiliate the provincial teacher crumbled with each of Elly's words. Every gesture, every response, was a quiet triumph for the other woman.
Edo, for his part, couldn't take his eyes off Elly, admiring her simple blue dress, her natural grace, and the pearls adorning her neck with effortless elegance. "She's always been like this," he murmured, almost to himself as he observed how Elly's conversation captivated the guests. The evening wore on, and with it, a certainty began to settle in the air. Some victories aren't measured in jewels or wine labels. In one corner, Elly shared a story about her students, and the diners laughed genuinely, drawn to her warmth. As the toast drew near, Edo stepped away to the side garden, needing some fresh air. Before he turned the corner, he overheard a lively conversation among a group of guests.
She's remarkable. The difference is obvious, one woman remarked.
She has more class than the fiancé, another added. Did you see how she handled the wine discussion? With no pretension, just dignity. And to think Vera tried to humiliate her.
Edo froze in place, paralyzed. From his vantage point, he saw Vera approaching Elly, who was calmly chatting with Diego near the fountain.
Your school sounds fascinating,
Diego commented with a smile as their conversation flowed effortlessly.
Carmen, dear. Vera's voice was overly sweet but carried a sharp edge. Are you enjoying yourself?
Very much, thank you. I must say, this party is different from the ones I usually attend.
Every celebration has its charm, Vera replied, with a calmness that barely hid her venom. But I must admit, graduations are my favorite. The genuine joy of the students is priceless. Diego smiled, appreciating the answer, while Vera gripped her glass tightly, her anger barely contained. By the way, Vera continued, that dress, is it from a wealthy family? It's my grandmother's, Elly replied, gently touching the fabric. Like the pearls, isn't that right? She added, as if recognizing the challenge in the question. A heavy silence followed. Edo, who had taken a step forward, stopped when he saw Elly's poised response.
Yes, it shows, she said with a calm smile. Every piece has its own story of love and dignity. My grandmother always told me that true elegance doesn't need labels.
Vera instantly turned pale. Diego couldn't suppress a smile behind his glass.
If you'll excuse me, Elly said, with a disarming grace that neutralized any further attempt at attack. I believe it's time for the toast.
Edo, still in the shadows of the garden, stepped back, but Flora had already spotted him.
Do you see it now?
She asked softly.
See what? He replied, barely listening.
The difference between seeming and being.
From the center of the garden, Vera tried to command everyone's attention for the toast. Her designer dress glittered under the lights, her jewels sparkled. But Edo saw only Elly in her simple blue dress, radiant with an elegance that couldn't be bought. We need to go back, Edo murmured, avoiding his mother's gaze.
Yes,
Flora replied in a tone that made it clear she understood more than Edo wanted to admit.
though I wonder, what exactly are you returning to?
Glasses were raised, camera flashes captured the moment, but in that instant, something had shifted, something that could never be undone. An uncomfortable truth revealed under the bright lights of the party. The first chords of the wedding waltz filled the air, and on the dance floor, Edo and Vera glided with precision. She, perfectly choreographed, like an actress on stage. He, mechanically present, almost like a wax figure.
Everyone is talking about her,
Vera muttered through clenched teeth, keeping the polished smile on her face for the cameras.
Your plan didn't work, murmured Edo, his gaze fixed on their dance steps.
My plan? Vera replied with a faint smile that never reached her eyes. It was your idea to turn this into a spectacle.
As other couples joined the waltz, Diego approached table 8 and politely asked, "May I have this dance?" He extended his hand to Elly, who accepted without hesitation. Isabel watched the scene, furious, while her husband dozed off in his chair, oblivious to the tension. Elly's blue dress swayed with the grace of someone accustomed to carrying life with simplicity and style, even if it wasn't haute couture.
You have a gift for teaching, Diego commented as they danced, a genuine smile crossing his face. The way you explain things makes everything seem so accessible. Children are the best teachers of humility.
From his position, Edo couldn't help but watch them. Elly moved with the same ease she used to teach her students math, using examples of planets, and with the same elegance with which she handled the biting criticisms always directed at her. Effortlessly, she found herself at the center of the dance floor, sharing her quiet presence, showing she was much more than a borrowed dress. Edo, focus, Vera said, gripping his hand tightly. This is our waltz. But his mind wandered, recalling Elly teaching him calculus in the school library, sharing sandwiches during breaks, dreaming together of making the world a better place, one student at a time. The music shifted, and couples rotated seamlessly. "Dance with me, son," Flora exclaimed, taking Vera's place in Edo's arms. "Mom, look!" Vera's voice called out discreetly, pointing toward Elly. "One builds an empire of appearances, while the other builds futures."
Edo remained silent. The evening progressed, and with it, a steady flow of champagne. Conversations grew more relaxed, more candid.
"Your ex-girlfriend is delightful," an older business partner remarked, passing by Edo. "How refreshing to see authenticity at these events." Elly bid Diego farewell with a kind smile and returned to her table. Her steps were light, like someone with a clear conscience. Her grandmother's pearls glimmered under the garden lights, silent witnesses to a victory no one had anticipated. The first stars began to appear over the estate as Elly decided it was time to leave. She picked up her small bag and the poetry book she had yet to deliver. "Leaving so soon?" Diego asked with concern. "It's barely 11. I have to prepare for next week's lessons tomorrow. Thank you, but I've already called a taxi," Elly replied. Isabel, who had been eavesdropping, couldn't hold back. "Not staying for tomorrow's brunch?"
Sundays are for family, Elly responded naturally. My mother is making chiles en nogada.
She made her way to the main table to say goodbye. Vera barely glanced at her, busy with a group of photographers. Edo stood automatically as if it were part of a choreography he knew too well. "Thank you for the invitation," Elly said, handing him the book. "I wish you all the happiness." Edo took the package, recognizing its shape. Poetry, like the books they used to share in the school library. Moments when they felt closer than their lives allowed. "I'll walk you out," Flora offered, cutting off any response from her son. As they walked through the illuminated garden, Flora linked her arm with Elly's. "Come visit me again," she whispered, "without all this fuss."
"I will," Elly replied with a genuine smile.
At the entrance, the taxi was already waiting. Elly hugged Flora sincerely. "You are exactly who you've always been," the older woman said. "And that, my dear, is worth more than all my son's millions." Elly smiled, touching her grandmother's pearls one last time. The taxi pulled away, and through the window, she saw Edo in the distance, the poetry book still in his hands. For a moment, their eyes met. There was no resentment in Elly's gaze, only the serene certainty of someone who had chosen the right path. The estate faded into the night, its lights disappearing like a mirage.
Elly closed her eyes, thinking of her students, the cardboard planets waiting in her classroom, and tomorrow's chiles en nogada. The taxi driver glanced at her in the rearview mirror.
"Good party?"
Enlightening.
Elly replied with a smile. The stars shone over Puebla, the same stars under which two young dreamers once envisioned changing the world. One of them, at least, was succeeding, one student at a time.
The poetry book rested on Edo's mahogany desk, untouched for 3 days, an unspoken accusation. Finally, he opened it. A note slipped out from between its pages. "To remember that the most valuable dreams are those we build day by day. Congratulations, Elly."
The marked poem was one by Pablo Neruda, the kind they used to read together in the library of their elementary school. His phone vibrated, another message from Vera, sent from her honeymoon in the Maldives. Pictures on yachts, sunset cocktails, new jewelry. Edo closed the app and, taking a deep breath, searched on his browser. Benito Juarez Elementary School, Puebla. The website was simple, almost rudimentary. Photos of kids presenting science projects, an art festival, and a play of Don Quixote. In one image, Elly stood in front of the blackboard, explaining with the same passion she brought to teaching algebra. Her face reflected patience, a dedication that went beyond mere teaching.
Am I interrupting?
Flora's voice resonated in the office, sudden and unannounced.
No,
Edo quickly shut his laptop. "Do you need something?" he asked, trying to sound casual. "Diego Montero called," Flora informed him, raising an eyebrow. "He's going to fund a science lab at Elly's school."
Edo remained silent, his mind still caught up in the images of his ex-wife.
"Do you know what one of your partners told me at the wedding?" Flora continued.
We need more teachers like her in private schools.
Mom, your office buildings are impressive, but she's building futures. Flora walked over to the desk and picked up the book of Neruda's poetry. Have you read this? She asked, placing it back on the table.
No, he replied.
You should. Sometimes we need others to remind us of who we wanted to be.
Edo gazed out the window of his office, 42 stories above the city, surrounded by glass and steel, so far removed from the playground where he once shared sandwiches and dreams. His mother stopped by the door. Elly teaches support classes on Saturdays, she added before leaving, in case you ever want to remember what it feels like to build something that truly matters. Silence filled the office as the laptop screen continued to display the school's webpage, where children surrounded Elly, smiling in front of a solar system made from recycled materials. Edo reopened Neruda's book. The words spoke of simple dreams, daily victories, and the beauty of authenticity. Outside, Mexico City maintained its frenetic pace. But for the first time in years, the noise of ambition was drowned out by the echo of an old promise. We'll build something important. 6 months after the wedding, the playground of Benito Juarez Elementary School buzzed with activity. Workers installed equipment in the new science lab while children watched eagerly through the windows. Vera, reviewing the blueprints with Diego Montero, noticed the black Mercedes parked in front of the school. Edo stepped out of the car, impeccably dressed, yet visibly uneasy, holding a folder in his hands.
Good morning, he greeted as he approached. Am I interrupting?
Diego exchanged a glance with Elly, who discreetly excused herself.
What are you doing here? Elly asked, her usual calm intact.
I have a proposal, Edo replied, opening the folder. The Ramirez Foundation wants to create a scholarship fund for public school students, teacher training, equipment.
He paused, choosing his next words carefully.
Schools with big gardens and enormous libraries.
Elly gave him a faint, almost imperceptible smile. Why?
Because someone reminded me of who I wanted to be. From a nearby classroom, the chatter of children reciting multiplication tables could be heard, the same room where a cardboard solar system still hung from the ceiling.
We don't need charity, Edo.
It's not charity, it's redemption.
Elly looked out at the playground where Miguel, one of her math students, enthusiastically explained the new microscope's features to his peers. You'll have to present the project to the school board, she finally said, and follow the official procedures.
I know, Edo responded.
A group of children ran past them, chasing a new ball. Diego's lab wouldn't be the only change at the school.
Vera knows about this.
We're getting divorced, Edo said, his voice steady, distant. Elly nodded without surprise or judgment, as if everything were part of a script she already knew. Support classes are on Saturdays at 9, she said, turning toward the building, in case you really want to remember what it feels like to build something important.
Edo watched her walk away, her steps carrying the same quiet dignity and certainty. Around her neck, her grandmother's pearls shimmered in the morning sunlight. The children continued reciting multiplication tables, and in the playground, Miguel had gathered a group of classmates, explaining physics concepts using stones and leaves.
Edo loosened his tie and tucked the folder away, reflecting. Some dreams take detours before finding their way back.
The black Mercedes drove off, leaving Benito Juarez Elementary School behind. But this time, it wasn't a goodbye. It was the start of a new chapter.